Welcome back to the deep dive. This time we're going to be looking at Deepak Nitrite Limited.
DNL?
Yeah, you got it. And we've got their Q3 and 9-month FY25 earnings call transcript that you sent over.
Yeah, and this is really fascinating. I think there's a lot here I think that will be really interesting to our listeners because DNL is, a major player in the Indian chemical industry. And this transcript gives us a real window, I think, into how they're thinking about the future and also, some of the challenges that they're facing.
Yeah, I was really struck by that too when I was looking through the transcript, just sort of the mix of we're going to be the best.
Right.
And we're also facing all these headwinds, but we're going to overcome them.
Right, exactly.
So I think before we get into the nitty gritty, can you just give us a quick overview of what DNL actually does? What are their main areas of business?
Yeah, definitely. So DNL essentially operates across two segments.
Okay.
Advanced intermediates and phenolics.
Okay, so advanced intermediates.
Yeah.
What are we talking about here?
So advanced intermediates, think of them as kind of specialty chemicals.
Okay.
That are used in a wide range of industries. So they're kind of the building blocks for things like agrochemicals. So those products that protect crops and dyes and pigments.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they're not the final product that you would necessarily see on the shelf.
Right.
But they are absolutely essential in a lot of different manufacturing processes.
Got it. So it's they're behind the scenes, but
yes, it's
really crucial.
Yeah, really important.
Okay. And what about phenolics?
So that's where DNL produces some more commonly known chemicals like phenol acetone and IPA isopropyl alcohol.
Oh, IPA. Yeah.
So if you remember during the pandemic, all that hand sanitizer,
yeah.
IPA was a key ingredient.
That's right. Yeah, so they're in a lot of different markets then.
Absolutely.
That must be a good thing, I would say, especially when, the world economy is so uncertain right now.
Definitely diversification is super important for any company, but especially, in a cyclical industry like chemicals where things go up and down and, the economy impacts them.
Right.
And one thing that the transcript highlighted is that DNL is really pursuing a strategy of vertical integration.
Vertical integration. Okay, for those of us who don't speak fluent business, what does that mean?
Yeah, so essentially DNL is trying to gain more control over their supply chain by producing more of their own raw materials. So instead of just relying on external suppliers for the ingredients they need,
right,
they're kind of trying to create their own sources. So it's like building a fortress around their business to protect themselves from price fluctuations and supply disruptions.
That's smart, yeah.
It's really clever, yeah.
Reduce risk and boost profitability?
Exactly, yeah, in the long run, yeah.
Okay, so one example they mentioned was diversified their ammonia sourcing, right?
Yes, exactly. So ammonia is a key ingredient for a lot of their processes. And, by having multiple sources for it, they're less vulnerable if there's a price spike or, some disruption in the ammonia market.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, but the transcript also mentions some challenges specifically in that advanced intermediate segment.
Yeah.
Something about destocking and raw material costs.
Exactly. So it seems like, they've been facing some headwinds in that segment. International customers have been kind of working through their existing inventory, which has led to a slowdown in orders. And like you mentioned, raw material costs have been stubbornly high.
Yeah.
Which puts pressure on profit margins.
Like a double whammy.
It is, yeah. A tough situation.
Ouch. So how are they dealing with all of this?
Well, it seems like, they've had to make some tough decisions. They talked about prioritizing market share, even if it means accepting tighter margins for now.
Okay.
And potentially even temporarily idling some of their plants.
Oh, wow. Okay, so they're playing the long game?
Yeah, it seems so, yeah.
Hoping demand will come back.
Hoping things will pick back up. And that's where, that diversified approach we talked about comes in.
Right.
So while advanced intermediates, hit a bit of a rough patch, the demand for phenolics remained really strong in India.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, essential chemicals like the ones they use in that segment.
Right.
Are going to be in demand in a growing economy like India's.
Exactly, yeah.
But they did mention a planned plant shutdown in Q3, didn't they?
They did, yeah. They had a scheduled shutdown for maintenance and also to implement some, efficiency improvements.
Okay.
Which did lead to an temporary reduction in production volume.
Right. So hopefully those improvements pay off.
Yeah.
But let's talk bigger picture. What's the overall outlook for the industries that DNL operates in?
Yeah. So let's start with the agrochemicals market.
Okay.
The global outlook points towards mid-single digit growth.
Okay.
Which is a positive sign.
Right.
After a period of, that inventory destocking that we talked about.
So they might see some relief soon.
They seem to think so, yeah. They said they expect that positive impact to kick in with a lag of about 1 quarter.
Okay, fingers crossed, right?
Yeah.
What about on the phenolic side?
So demand for phenolics remains really robust in India.
Okay.
Think about it, sectors like automotive, pharmaceuticals, construction, furniture, they all rely on these chemicals.
Yep.
And, with the Indian economy continuing to grow, DNL is in a good position to capitalize on that demand.
Okay, so far so good, but of course no business operates in a vacuum.
True.
What about competition? Are there other players that DNL needs to be worried about?
Definitely, yeah. They acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is Chinese overcapacity.
Okay.
This is a major challenge, particularly for certain products like DASTA. It's a key intermediate used in dyes, where China's, production glut is really driving down prices.
Oh, so that's what they mean by like stubborn raw material costs.
Exactly, yeah. It's not just the cost of the materials themselves, it's also the whole competitive landscape.
Right, okay.
And it's not just China. They also mentioned that the global chemical industry in general is under a lot of stress right now.
Yeah.
A lot of players, even big international ones, are operating at low utilization rates, sometimes even below profitability thresholds.
Wow, so it's a tough environment.
It is a tough environment.
Again, right now.
And it's forcing companies like DNL to get really creative, focusing on those strategic initiatives like vertical integration, diversifying their product portfolio
Right.
to stay ahead of the curve.
So they're being proactive.
Yeah.
Which is good to see.
Which is good, yeah.
But with all this talk about, global stress and all this competitions, I'm curious what the future holds for DNL.
Right.
Are they just like hunkering down, waiting for the storm to pass? Or are they actually making moves to position themselves for future growth?
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, I like where this is going. Give me the details.
They're definitely not sitting still.
Okay.
They're actively developing new products and expanding capacity, particularly in segments where they see that resilient demand.
Okay.
They're also moving forward with several strategic projects that could be real game changers.
Like what? Give me the details.
Okay, so for starters, they're investing in a new nitric acid complex.
Okay.
It's in the permissioning stage right now and should be fully operational in Q1 of FY26.
Okay.
They're also building a new R&D center, which is set to be completed by Q4 of this fiscal year.
Okay, so it's like a focus on both like immediate production needs, but also long-term innovation.
Exactly, a two-pronged approach.
That's smart.
Yeah, and then there are the MIBK, MEBC facilities, which are scheduled to be commissioned in the first half of FY26.
Okay.
These will expand their presence in the energy sector and allow them to produce advanced solvents that are used in industries like pharmaceuticals and electronics.
So they're branching out.
They are, branching out both within their core chemical markets and into new territories.
That's ambitious.
It is ambitious.
But also potentially risky, right? I mean, we've already talked about all these challenges they're facing.
You're right. Yeah, there are definitely risks involved, and we'll delve into those in a bit. But first, we need to talk about DNL's most ambitious plan, which is their entry into the polymer value chain.
Polymer, that's a big word. Break that down for us. What are polymers, and why is it such a big deal for DNL?
Okay, so think of polymers as like the building blocks for a vast array of materials we use every day.
Okay.
Plastics, resins, synthetic fibers.
Wow, okay.
It's a massive global market, and DNL is making a bold play to become a major player in this space.
So they're not just producing chemicals anymore.
Yeah.
They're trying to become like a materials company.
Exactly. It's a huge shift.
That's huge. Okay, what does that actually involve? Like, are they building new facilities? Are they buying other companies?
They're doing a bit of everything. They've already secured long-term contracts for key building blocks, so those essential raw materials that are needed for polymer production.
Okay.
They've also agreed to acquire assets for polycarbonate resin production.
Polycarbonate resin. I don't think I've heard of that.
So that's a critical component in a lot of high-performance plastics that are used in everything from automotive parts to medical devices.
Okay.
So it's a high-value market, and DNL is positioning themselves to try to capture a piece of that.
Wow, they're really thinking big.
They are.
But is it realistic? I mean, the chemical industry is super competitive, especially when it comes to polymers.
Right.
Are they biting off more than they can chew?
That's a valid question. It's a high-stakes gamble for sure, and there are definitely risks involved, especially given all the dynamics we've talked about.
Right.
But on the other hand, this could be a game changer for them.
Yeah.
It could potentially transform them from a regional player to a global force in the chemical industry.
So it's like they're at a crossroads.
Yeah.
Facing challenges in their existing business.
Right.
But at the same time, making these huge bets on the future.
Exactly. And that brings us to the key question, which is, what are the risks associated with all of these ambitious plans?
Okay, yeah, because let's be real. The chemical industry, it's not exactly smooth sailing.
Rarely, yeah.
So tell me, what are the potential pitfalls that DNL needs to watch out for?
Well, first and foremost, they've already experienced some project delays,
Uh-oh.
which have impacted their profitability. So the nitric acid complex and those MIBC facilities we talked about,
Right.
they're behind schedule.
Okay, why the delays?
Well, they attributed them to incorporating new technologies.
Okay.
And really wanting to ensure a smooth ramp up once those facilities are operational.
So potentially growing pains,
Yeah, hopefully just growing pains.
but not a sign of deeper problems.
We'll see.
Okay, what else?
Well, global market volatility is always a concern in the chemical industry.
Right.
Prices for key raw materials like benzene, propylene, ammonia can fluctuate wildly. And that obviously impact margins. And remember, even though DNL is, diversifying their sourcing, they're still exposed to those price swings.
Right, they can't completely escape market force.
Right, exactly. Okay.
Anything else?
Well, we've already talked about competition, especially
Right.
from China.
Yeah.
But that's something they're going to need to navigate really carefully as they expand into this polymer market. They're going up against some established global players.
Right.
With deep pockets and years of experience.
So they're facing a lot of pressure, it sounds like.
They are, yeah.
Both internally and externally.
Uh-huh.
It sounds like they're making some bold moves, but there are definitely some risks along the way.
Absolutely. Their success really hinges on their ability to execute these ambitious plans while navigating this really complex and volatile market.
So it's a high-stakes balancing act.
It is.
But it's also what makes this so interesting.
Right.
We're watching a company in transition.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Trying to reinvent themselves.
Yeah.
Carve out a new future.
Exactly.
In a rapidly changing industry.
It's a story full of twists and turns, and we're only just beginning to unravel it.
Ooh, okay, I'm hooked. I need to hear more about how this unfolds.
Don't worry. We'll delve deeper into their strategy and analyze their chances of success in our next segment. So stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Before the break, we were talking about DNL's plans to get into the polymer value chain.
Right.
And it sounds like kind of a risky move.
Yeah.
But also potentially like a really transformative one.
Yeah, it is. And there are several layers to kind of unpack here, I think.
Okay.
But let's start with, what this strategy means for India as a whole.
Okay, so zoom out for us. What's the bigger picture here?
Yeah, so, India is heavily reliant on polymer imports.
Okay.
Especially for those high-performance materials that we were just talking about.
Right.
And, DNL's move to kind of establish domestic production could be a game changer in terms of reducing that reliance on foreign suppliers.
So it's like a Make in India initiative, but for polymers.
Exactly. Yeah, you got it.
Okay, so we've got the economic angle covered.
Yeah.
But producing polymers, especially on a large scale, that can have like environmental implications, right?
Yeah, you're raising a really important point. I mean, the chemical industry, by its nature, does have an environmental footprint.
Right.
And the production of polymers can be energy intensive and it can generate waste.
So is DNL's polymer push like a potential environmental concern?
Well, it's something to definitely keep an eye on. They did emphasize their commitment to sustainability throughout the earnings call.
Okay.
They talked about, efforts to improve the carbon footprint of their products.
Okay.
And they pointed to, their improved scores on various sustainability indexes.
That's good, but it's still a little vague. Did they give any specifics about how they're actually going to make their polymer production more sustainable?
Yeah, that's where the details get a little fuzzy.
Okay.
They haven't released like a comprehensive environmental impact assessment for these polymer projects yet. So, they're talking the talk.
Yeah.
But we need to see if they walk the walk.
So more questions than answers at this point.
Yeah, a bit of a wait and see situation.
It feels like there's a lot riding on these polymer projects. Not just for DNL's bottom line,
right,
but for like India's economic and environmental future.
Yeah, it's a really complex situation, and it highlights this tension, I think, between economic growth and environmental responsibility.
Right.
And DNL is trying to balance those competing priorities.
Yeah.
But it's a delicate dance.
And this isn't just a challenge for DNL, is it? This is something the entire chemical industry is kind of grappling with right now.
Absolutely. Demand for chemicals is only going to increase as the global population grows and economies expand.
Right.
So the question becomes, how do we meet that growing demand without, jeopardizing the planet?
Yeah.
How do we reconcile economic growth with environmental sustainability?
That's the big question.
It is, yeah.
And I don't know if there's an easy answer.
There isn't.
To that.
But it's a question I think we need to keep asking, both of ourselves as consumers and of companies like DNL.
Okay, so taking a step back, what are the key takeaways for you from this deep dive into DNL, like what stands out as the most important insights?
Yeah, for me, it's the sheer ambition of their plans. I mean, they're not just trying to maintain their position in a really challenging market, but
Right.
aiming to like reshape the entire playing field.
Yeah,
It's a bold strategy,
it is.
and it'll be really interesting to see how it unfolds.
I agree it's risky, but it's also kind of exciting to see an Indian company aiming for global leadership
Right.
in such a strategically important sector.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that even in like mature industries, there's always room for disruption and innovation.
Yeah.
And that, companies that are willing to take calculated risks and think long term can potentially reap significant rewards.
But those rewards come with responsibilities, right?
Of course.
Especially in an industry with such a significant environmental footprint.
Absolutely. DNL and any company operating in the chemical sector has a duty to prioritize sustainability and to operate ethically,
Yeah, right.
It's not just good business practice, it's an imperative for the health of the planet and future generations.
So it sounds like we're left with a bit of a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
DNL's at this really pivotal moment,
Uh-huh.
making big bets on the future while facing these, significant challenges in the present.
Exactly. It's a classic story of risk and reward, ambition and responsibility, and the outcome is far from certain.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm definitely invested in seeing how the story plays out.
Me too, and that's what makes this deep dive so compelling. We're witnessing a company in transition, navigating this really complex and ever-changing landscape.
Yeah.
It's a story that has the potential to change not just DNL's future, but the future of the chemical industry as a whole.
Okay, I'm officially hooked. What else can you tell us about DNL's journey?
Well, there are still some unanswered questions that we need to explore.
Yep.
Questions that could help us understand not just DNL's prospects, but, the future of the chemical industry itself.
Ooh, I love a good mystery. So let's dive into those unanswered questions. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been kind of picking apart Deepak Nitrite Limited's story, and it's pretty clear they're at like this really pivotal moment.
Yeah.
But we were just talking about how there's still some like big questions out there.
Definitely. And I think these questions go beyond just DNL specifically.
Right.
They touch on some of the really fundamental challenges facing the whole chemical industry.
Okay, so let's get right to it. What are these unanswered questions that have you like thinking?
Yeah, well, one that keeps coming back to me is, can DNL really balance their aggressive growth ambitions with a genuine commitment to sustainability?
Okay.
They've talked a lot about their commitment to lowering their carbon footprint and achieving high scores on, these sustainability indexes.
Right.
But how will that translate into action, especially as they ramp up their polymer production, which can be really energy intensive?
Right, so it's one thing to talk the talk,
Exactly.
but another to walk the walk.
Yeah, and they're going to be under scrutiny not just from investors and regulators, but also from consumers
Yeah.
who are becoming increasingly aware of the environmental practices of the companies they support.
That's right.
So the question remains, can DNL deliver on these sustainability promises while also pursuing these ambitious growth plans?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And you said that this isn't unique to DNL. This is something the whole industry has to figure out?
Absolutely, and it leads to another unanswered question.
Okay.
What role will innovation play in making the chemical industry more sustainable?
Okay.
We're seeing a lot of R&D focused on greener chemistries, more efficient processes, closed-loop systems that minimize waste and emissions.
So basically trying to figure out how to produce the chemicals we need
Yeah,
without destroying the planet
exactly. That's the goal.
in the process.
Yeah. We're talking about innovations like using bio-based feedstocks instead of fossil fuels, harnessing renewable energy sources for production, and even exploring things like carbon capture technologies to offset emissions.
That all sounds really promising,
It does.
but how quickly can these innovations be scaled up to actually make a difference?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a race against time, because as we've talked about, demand for chemicals is just going up.
Right.
So the industry really needs to accelerate the pace of innovation and adoption of these cleaner technologies.
Okay, so innovation is crucial, but what about us? What about consumers?
Right.
Can we play a role in pushing the industry towards a more sustainable future?
I think we absolutely can. Our choices have power.
Okay.
We can support companies that are actively investing in sustainability. We can advocate for stricter environmental regulations.
Right.
And, we can be mindful of our own consumption patterns.
Right.
Choosing products from companies with, strong environmental track records sends a clear signal to the market.
So it's a shared responsibility.
It is.
Companies need to step up, innovate,
Yeah.
and consumers need to kind of make informed choices and hold those companies accountable?
Exactly. It's a two-way street. The future of the chemical industry really depends on both sides working together to create a more sustainable path forward.
Yeah, I really like that perspective. It's a reminder that we're not just passive bystanders in all of this.
Right.
We can actually do something
Yeah.
to shape a more sustainable future.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the most important takeaways from our deep dive into Deepak Nitrite Limited.
Yeah.
You know, their story is just one example of these really complex challenges and opportunities facing the chemical industry.
It's a story that's still being written
Yeah.
with implications for India, the global economy, and the environment.
Absolutely. A story we'll continue to follow closely.
That's it for our deep dive into Deepak Nitrite Limited. We hope this gave you a clearer picture of their current state, their challenges, and their plans for the future. Now it's over to you. What insights from this deep dive resonated most with you? We'd love to hear your thoughts.